Good morning, YouTubers. On today's episode of What's Inside of That Box, we're going to inspect and talk about what's in here. And since I'm not Brad Pitt, I don't have to worry too much about what is actually in this box. Uh-oh. Ta-da! Oh, you can't even see it. Look at that. A welding helmet. Let's look at this. So I figure it's tax return season, which is my favorite time of the year because it's when I get to run and hide for about 8 months. But anyways, this is a common welding helmet or hood that a lot of you guys own or are looking at. And I thought, well, I already did the new Lincoln Viking and I did the E-Sub Sentinel. Why not do probably arguably the most popular one? It's this one in the Viking 3350. And do a review on this, so a whole unboxing review, and then do a shootout where I compare all of them and see which one is really the best in my opinion. So today's video, we're just going to tackle unboxing, seeing what you get, my initial impressions, and then I will have a review video where I compare and contrast all of these in a shootout style. So let's open this up and see what you get for somewhere around $300 after rebates. Oh, that's kind of funny. It comes with the handles, but they're underneath there. Huh, weird. Whatever. So you get just a helmet bag, nothing too fancy there. Whole bunch of face shields. Looks like 2 or 3 external and 1 or 2 internals. That's nice. Huh, that's interesting. This must be a cheater lens holder, I think. So you can slip a cheater lens in it, and as a matter of fact, yeah, magnifying lens adapter. So apparently you need to have this to put a cheater lens in there. Comes with this suspension thing for the helmet. I don't know if there's something I'm going to mention about that later. And ta-da! Look at that. Let's do a close-up. So let's talk about the front of this hood. This is the Infinity series, so it's the highest end. It has the biggest viewing angle or viewing size of any of Miller's welding hoods. Now this one they actually claim is the biggest of all of them available out there. That may be true, and that's something I'll test in the comparison video and actually measure it. But one thought on that is that the size of the viewing matters to a certain extent depending on how close your eyes actually sit to it. And what I mean by that is that if you happen to have your eye position closer to this, you're going to have a very wide angle of viewing. If your eyes happen to sit further away than some of the, say, smaller cartridges, this, despite being bigger, might not give you a better viewing angle. So you can't just go by size of what they claim it is, because it really depends on what your eye position is. Now, this uses a solar array. That's likely just to supplement battery power. The batteries it uses are lithium, and they're not designed to be rechargeable. So I don't believe that any of these hoods charge the battery. They simply offset some of the power consumption via the solar array. This has 4 sensors. You have 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top. That's to pick up the arc. So you can have a fairly obstructed view of something and this will still pick it up. And that's something that you find on the higher end welding hoods, is that they typically have 4 sensors instead of just 2. The lower end ones typically have 2, and at lower amperage outputs, so for like TIG sub 30 amps along with obstructed view welding, this will often pick up a arc and stay dark, versus a lot of the cheaper hoods out there are just going to flash you. Now this also features something that I guess is a Miller exclusive. It's called X mode. And what X mode Miller claims at least is it picks up like the electromagnetic field of the arc, and when it senses that, it darkens. And you may be wondering, well, that's a mouthful, and why would that be useful? Well, from the people that I've talked with that own this, they say that you can weld outdoors and switch it to that mode and not get random switches or random flashes like you would in a normal mode. And because basically what happens is the sunlight will hit a sensor, it thinks that you're welding or sparks are going on, and it auto darkens. And if you've ever welded outside with a cheap welding hood, you know how frustrating that can be when it keeps switching between dark light when you're actually not welding. So X mode supposedly will solve that to where you can weld outside, and actually it only darkens when it needs to, when you're actually welding. I would imagine that technology does work. That's something we're going to really look at in the testing video, where I compare all the hoods that I have to really see if it's a benefit or if it's just marketing wink. Now, besides that, this unit is a little bit unique in the sense that the gasket and this plastic seal here, you remove that and the cartridge comes out the front. So most of the hoods out there, I mean almost all of them, the cartridge comes out the back. So that's a little bit unique on this. And this, obviously, this clear shield is replaceable. Now, one thing I don't like with this setup, and if you happen to have this hood and have used it a lot, you can give an opinion on it. I'm a little bit worried about dust getting back in here and then getting on the cartridge face. And the reason I say that is that, well, that cartridge face, if you scratch that, you can't fix that. So like if this shield gets scratched, you just replace it and you have perfect vision through it. Well, if that cartridge gets scratched at all, you're screwed. Like you can't really replace that screen, and it's very expensive. Obviously, the whole cost of this hood is in that. Now, you could use a microfiber and special cleaning fluid to wipe it, but metal dust just has a tendency to scratch stuff. It's just hard, right? Especially aluminum oxide from grinding aluminum is unbelievably hard. So it's a thought. I'd be a little worried about that. Now, this does seem to be better sealed than the ESAB Sentinel, which is basically wide open. There is no gasket or seal, so I'm not quite as worried about this. But the Lincoln Viking and many other hoods, they put this plastic almost directly on the cartridge, and then there's a gasket that is around it, and you don't really get dust in there. So that's something not to worry about, but something to be cognizant of, that you want to be very careful you don't scratch the screen in there. Now, let's talk a little bit about the overall design of this. This is the Armed Forces one, which is called the Honor. I bought it because, well, for a couple of reasons. One, I support the troops in this country. Thank you guys, if you're watching, for your service and your dedication. I myself was never in the armed services, the military. Believe it or not, I actually wanted to be a heavy equipment mechanic for the Army when I was a lot younger. And due to medical complications and issues, I couldn't actually join. So kind of unfortunate, but hey, I still support our troops here. And I figured a lot of people out there might be looking at this particular one to give to a student that happens to be in the armed services, or maybe a family member, a husband. So I think this is going to be a pretty popular unit, and I wanted to give an opinion on it. And I'll tell you what, the paint job on this is really exceptional. Miller's always done a good job on that. Them and Lincoln really do a good job on artwork and stuff on their hoods. Not to mention, I guess Miller will donate $10 of the sale of every one of these to a nonprofit organization that helps troops. So that's kind of a cool thing. I don't know much about the organization they donate to, and so I'm not going to get political on anything like that. But considering the price was the same, I believe, as the standard one, and even if it was more, I don't care. Some of the proceeds from this go to at least a reasonably good cause. So I support that. Well, let's look at the inside of this. So now comes a time where I'm going to try this on my head and give my initial impressions of the fit of it. And no, you're not going to see me wear it over my face. I'm still on a run from 18 years of tax evasion. I don't plan on getting caught now. So it fits my head pretty good. And I'll flip this up and talk about it. So The interesting thing with this hood, and I kind of had it set up for my head, it feels very sturdy. Unlike the newer Lincoln Viking I just reviewed, the headgear on this being thick plastic, it has almost no flex to it side to side. So when you put it on, it feels like it's part of you, not like you just, I don't know, loosely attach something, which I really like. Also, the detent to hold it up, and I'll take it off my head to show you. So the detent to hold it up is probably the strongest detent I've ever seen in a welding helmet. It's so strong that when you, like, look at this. You hear that? When I initially tried to put this up, I'm like, man, what the hell? It's broke. It doesn't have a detent on the up part. But no, it is literally the strongest one I've ever seen. So if you have an issue where your hood basically stays, it keeps falling down on you, this headgear is where it's at for that. No doubt. I mean, listen to that. The only downside is, well, if you do that enough, you'll probably be deaf because it's pretty loud inside of it. A couple other interesting things when it's on my face. This, if you're claustrophobic at all, you definitely wouldn't be with this. The area around your cheeks are so open that there's a lot of room in here, which is nice. And there's going to be no question, no issue wearing a respirator with this, I think. It might get a little bit tight here because it curves down, but realistically, I think this will fit with a respirator without issue. So that's a plus, which you would think it would, since a lot of people now wear those, and I recommend them, and that they would make it compatible with at least their cartridge filter that they offer. Now, beyond that, I'm telling you guys, this plastic headgear seems to be pretty strong compared to a lot of them. This adjuster for how far your face sits, I'm not a huge fan of. I think that's could have been better, but realistically, it's one of those things you set it and you forget about it. You don't adjust that all the time. The weird thing is, and I've never seen this before, is that this sits like this. It spreads these out. I thought like you'd have to grab it and screw with it, but when you put your head in, your head catches this and puts it right where it needs to be. I kind of like that design, and I've never seen that before. If anything, you can set it down like this, and you're not getting your headgear all contaminated with sweat and whatever grease is on the table. So that was kind of interesting. Most of them sit like this. So when you set it down, anything that you set it down on is going to get all over that and get in your hair. Although you should be wearing a welding cap like a cool guy anyways, so that's, I guess, not a huge issue, but I like that. Now, this I thought was hard plastic initially. This is actually foam. It's almost as hard plastic, so realistically, it's a little bit different. I mean, normally you either get hard plastic or some kind of felt-like material. So this right here, I don't know if it's a benefit or not, but it is what it is. I do like the fit of this unit. Now, this back here is kind of a controversy. And what I mean by that is Miller came out with a different headset than this, or different headgear, for a while, and then apparently people didn't like it to the point that Miller now brought this back as the legacy. And I find that kind of weird because Lincoln kind of did the same thing. They came out with one headgear, which is what I liked. Then they redid it, came out with a new one, which I think isn't quite as good as the older one. And Lincoln decided, nope, we're sticking with the new one. Well, Miller, apparently, as of 2024, all hoods are going to come with the legacy, which is this one. Now, I have never tried on the previous one. It looks a little bit different. I don't know what people's complaints were with it, because people complain about this one too. So honestly, who knows on that? But the reason I bring that up is that you want to be careful, because if you buy one of these hoods that's been at your welding supply store for a while, this headgear that you see in here might not be the one you get. And it has like a triangle type thing. It's a little different looking. So just so you know. Now, the detents in this seem to be pretty decent. I have heard that this isn't the most reliable mechanism. Who knows on that? I know that the older Lincoln 3350 is about the best as it gets as far as reliability, because I've had one, but the new one, I guess, is trash. This one, who knows? The rest of it, I can tell you, is designed to be very durable, especially compared to a lot of them that are out there that I've seen. As far as like negatives, I hate to nitpick, but the sweatband is about as cheap as you could possibly get on a headgear. Is that a bad thing? Probably not. Hopefully Miller, doesn't charge a lot of money to get a replacement for this. But you look at this is like the cheapest foam you can get. When you look at the ESOB Sentinel and the Viking, you get a far better foam pad on those that's a little bit more comfortable. This is a little thin, and to be honest, it kind of feels like an old gym sock. So again, I got to be critical on things that I think that are worth mentioning, but I think they dropped the ball a little bit on that, especially for a $300 plus welding hood after rebate. Beyond that, let's look at the internals here at how you adjust all of this. So here is Miller's control panel for their welding hood. It's pretty simple and self-explanatory. You have an on-off, and this is also selects mode. So this is cut mode, grind mode, X mode. X mode is that one where it picks up apparently the magnetic field of the arc, supposedly. So that would be like great for outdoors and stuff, or obstructed view. So for weld, let's see here. These buttons as well. Okay. So this is lighter, that's darker. You press it and it goes in half shades. I generally run somewhere around 11 to 12. Now delay, up or down. And this has a pretty good range for delay and likely shade as well. Sensitivity is basically what this thing considers a welding arc. The higher the sensitivity, the more likely everything in your shop, like fluorescent lights, are to trigger it. The lower it is, the more likely you are to get blinded by something because this thing didn't darken. Now it has two memories, so you can do 1 and 2. That's kind of nice. So you could, if you switch between like TIG and MIG a fair amount, you could have a TIG setting and a MIG setting, or for me, like I could have an aluminum TIG setting and a normal TIG settings, because I generally run a darker shade with aluminum. So those are all things you can do. Has a more button. Oh, I see. More is, I gotcha, is for the sensitivity. Now this does have a time. 0 arc hours, I believe that's referring to, or minutes, and then it has a count, which maybe it says 8. That's how many times it's darkened. So this likely was tested a few times, is my guess, is what the 8 is. And other than that, it has a little LED that tells you if the battery's low on this. Now the batteries, you have to pull the cartridge out of this, and this one appears to go out the front. So you got to pull the front apart, pop this out, and this generally has pretty good battery life on this unit because I believe it uses 2 batteries. Most of the competition only uses a single one, so this will last by far longer than most of the competition. So we're going to go to conclusion here shortly, but I thought I'd share a couple other things that I've noticed with this. So I've been wearing it for a couple minutes and screwing around, getting it dialed in and testing everything on it. And the knobs on the side, I can't say that I'm a big fan of. I mean, on one hand, it's good because they're small and you can easily grab them. But what they do is they use an O-ring inside for torque, or for so it doesn't slip, and you can adjust how much this, how easily it flips down. I find it's a little bit difficult to adjust that just right, to get the tension right. It does work, but I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of these knobs, and what I worry, and it might sound stupid, is because this isn't round, this might catch on crap behind here if you're welding underneath something, like who knows, maybe you're wearing a hoodie and the hoodie catches it. I think they would have been better served putting a round knob, but it's just a thought. The other thing is, the buttons on here are nice and all very easy to use. However, with a glove on, I don't think I'd be able to press some of these. So the accessibility of these, if you're wearing stick welding gloves, you can forget about it. But it's just a thought. And the other thing I didn't mention because I wasn't even thinking of it, this is probably the only welding hood on the market in elite level, so it's aka expensive as shit, that doesn't have a grind button on it. So there is no external grind button, and that's something I don't know why I just spaced out earlier on, but there's no grind button. And honestly, I like grind buttons. I've used for years an old Viking 3350, and that does not have a grind button because it was the first gen. And now that I have one with a grind button, like I'll never go back to not having one. So to hit grind, at least you could grab this with your hand and probably press it to go through. But when, say this is down, you might be able to slip your finger in here while you're actually looking through the viewing screen. But how would you know? Like, you can't really tell if you're on grind. You could be on one of the other modes. So is it easy to put it on grind? Yes, but it sucks. I'll be honest, it sucks they didn't put an external button on this. So it's just a thought. Whether or not that's an issue, for you, it's hard to say. That's personal opinion on that. Also, looking through this screen, and in the comparison video, I'll have a great comparison of all of these. I would say, if it's not the closest to accurate color when it's not in darkened shade of any hood that I've used, it's got to be top 2. It is almost, they call it clear view, I think, or clear light. It's almost as accurate of color as just staring at it. I would say it's a little bit darker. So that's pretty interesting, because I've had a lot of the higher end hoods back in the day that they would have a shade of green or a shade of like a yellowish or a blue. And this is very clear. Almost, it's not quite like wearing a clear lens only, but it's close. So that's a huge benefit. Beyond that, why don't we just go to conclusion? So in conclusion, what do I think of this? Well, I think the fit and finish of it and the build quality is exceptional, as are most of Miller's higher end hoods. The viewing size is very big. The fact that it uses 2 batteries will give you better lifespan on the batteries, so you're changing them out less. So that's all pluses. The headgear, I like the sturdiness of it, but the knob's not a big fan, and the rear gear and sprocket assembly to adjust, I guess, is like hit or miss. But hey, Miller decided to go to that, so that's what you got now. If for some reason you like the renovated headgear, you can buy it and replace this, or you can just buy the older model that had that. But like I said, there's probably both of them out there, so you got to be careful on what you buy. You might get the headgear you don't want, and it's kind of unfortunate because I don't believe that the part number has changed on them, so who knows what you're going to get. Definitely probably buy it at your local welding store so you can see what the hell you're buying. Beyond that, I think that this will serve you well. I really wish that it had a grind button on the exterior. So that's kind of, I guess, the only real big downside to this. Everything else looks pretty good. So is it worth the $300 after rebate? Well, that's going to come down to, I think, the comparison video I'm going to do next on the 3 higher end welding hoods that are out there. And in that video, we're going to test every aspect of these to really determine what is the best in every category. And I'm going to be upfront. I think that none of the hoods are perfect in every respect. I mean, some of them have great headgear, some of them don't, and that's the whole purpose of testing them. But for the sake of a higher-end welding helmet, I don't think you're going to be disappointed with this at all if you buy one of these. But if you really want to know how it stacks up, you'll have to come back and watch the other video that I'm coming out with soon. With that said, if you got any comments, questions, thoughts, or you own one of these and have information to share, feel free. It'll only help everyone out there. Until next time.